Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit BillHowe.com. And by the Conrad Trebas Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Maya Trabulsi. Thank you for joining us. A wastewater program that made San Diego a leader in COVID-19 surveillance has paused operations. With federal funding gone, KPBS health reporter Heidi DeMarco says scientists are concerned about dangerous gaps in virus tracking.
At the height of the pandemic, San Diego's wastewater program gave scientists a way to anticipate COVID-19 infections.
We learned that we could predict surges, we could detect variants as they reached our local population, in many cases even faster than we could by doing individual testing of infected persons.
Dr. Louise Laurent worked on the project. It was a collaboration between UC San Diego, Scripps Research, and Rady Children's Hospital. She says last week, the San Diego Epidemiology and Research for COVID Health program came to a halt. County officials say it's a direct result of federal funding cuts. The program didn't just detect COVID pathogens, says Scripps research scientist Josh Levi.
What we ended up doing in San Diego that really has distinguished us and allowed us to really lead nationwide is to start sequencing that wastewater and to figure out all of the different variants and subvariants and lineages that are emerging.
He says the pause means no more local sequencing, no new samples, and no way to track emerging threats in real time.
That means that we'll have a huge gap in terms of our ability to understand what has happened and what will happen in terms of the virus's evolution and spread in the community going forward.
UC San Diego's Dr. Robert Schooley says gutting public health protections now is dangerous, especially with rising cases of measles and bird flu.
Infectious diseases are here to stay, and it doesn't make sense to take away our ability to combat them.
He says wastewater activity was a key tool he used to advise immunocompromised patients.
To assess their level of risk and to know when to really mask up and when to stay out of circulation.
The county had been contributing about $600,000 in federal funds annually to the partnership. Officials say they will continue to monitor respiratory viruses through other methods and plan to add in-house water testing later this year. Heidi DeMarco, KPBS News.
Tonight we fall into the 50s, some clouds out there, but ultimately a pretty quiet story as we continue to deal with this high pressure system, right? It's been settling in over the southwest, rocketing the numbers up. In fact, in some areas just off to our east, we're talking record challenging heat. How will it be impacting us and when we start to come down over the upcoming days? I'll have that full forecast still ahead.
San Diego County tied with New York for the highest inflation rate in the nation. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Price Index shows inflation around our region was 3.8%. The main factors driving the high rate were gasoline, fruit, vegetables, and alcoholic beverages. Prices rose for the San Diego metro area at a faster rate than the nation, which averaged 2.4%. The effect of on and off tariffs from the Trump administration does not yet seem to be reflected in inflation reports, but as Michael Yoshida reports, economists worry the policies could send the cost of goods soaring.
Thursday's Consumer Price Index data showed U.S. inflation cooled to an annual rate of 2.4% in March. Prices fell 0.1% from February, the first time prices have fallen monthly since May 2020. Normally, this trend would stoke optimism. But economists warn this latest data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics doesn't take into account how tariffs could impact consumer goods prices going forward.
We are completely blind looking at the market. Today's CPI numbers, for example, really tell us nothing.
President Donald Trump's aggressive trade moves have already upended global markets and could make imports and likely end products for consumers markedly more expensive. Wednesday, the president announced a 90-day pause on all of his recently announced so-called reciprocal tariffs, except for those on China, which he raised again.
Everybody wants to come and make a deal, and we're working with a lot of different countries, and it's all going to work out very well.
Still, the escalating trade conflict with China, along with fresh pain from tariffs imposed on key goods, steel, aluminum, and cars, stressing markets, consumers, and businesses alike.
What would have cost me maybe $30,000 with a reasonable tariff now is going to cost me almost $200,000.
There is just not a pathway for everyone to pivot and change and magically create this manufacturing that doesn't exist today.
In Washington, Michael Yoshida, KPBS News.
A bit of reprieve. That's how one San Diego business leader describes President Trump's decision to pause reciprocal tariffs for 90 days. KPBS reporter John Carroll has more from the newsroom.
We first spoke with Eric Barnes back in early March as 25% tariffs on goods from Mexico and China were about to go into effect. Barnes is president and CEO of Highspan. They're a Chula Vista company that manufactures metal products for industrial commercial applications. He says Trump's decision to pause so-called reciprocal tariffs is a relief, but Barnes also says Trump's back and forth on who gets tariffs and how much is causing him financial whiplash. He says it's been nearly impossible to plan out purchases from vendors and sales agreements with customers. And while he's happy for the 90-day reprieve, that reprieve does not include China. The Trump administration now says Chinese products coming into the U.S. will be tariffed at 145%. Highspan sources raw materials from China that it uses to make auto parts.
We need them, and our business is built on a combination of what they produce and what we produce. So it makes it very difficult if that whole equation is radically upset or is changing day to day.
So, bottom line, the 90-day reprieve helps Barnes and his company out when it comes to tariffs on places like Mexico and Canada, but China is a big headache. He also emphasized to us once again how important predictability is to businesses on tariffs, but predictability has proven rather elusive over the last several weeks. In the newsroom, John Carroll, KPBS News.
4 students at San Diego State University have had their international student visas revoked. That is according to SDSU President Adela de la Torre's office. In an email to students, faculty, and staff today, school officials wrote that the federal government did not coordinate with the campus or provide advanced notice. They said SDSU employees should not provide information to federal immigration enforcement officers if approached, but instead direct them to university officials. Tijuana's migrant shelters are starting to feel the impacts of President Trump's cuts to international aid. Operators say they are considering cutting services or shutting down. KPBS reporter Gustavo Solis brings us this dispatch from Tijuana.
We're here in Tijuana's Casa del Migrante, one of the most historic migrant shelters in Tijuana. And we're hearing that the Trump administration, DOGE, budget cuts to USAID is having an impact here. They're losing funding. So we're going to go talk to Father Pat and find out what's going on. It looks kind of empty. Usually you can hear kids running around in there. Yes. It's quiet.
Yeah, we only have 40 people.
Oh, man.
And very few kids. Like many other institutions who lost funding when President Trump decided to take away all foreign assistance. That affected us. 40% of our budget was lost with that. We got funding for the first 3 months, so it really hit us starting this month. So with our recourse is to look for other sources of funding, and that's what we're doing. And also I'm going out and giving talks and trying to drum up funds.
From my understanding is you didn't get funding directly from USAID, but kind of through organizations that did get that funding.
United Nations, UNICEF, Catholic Relief Services, they all were cut big time.
Do you have money for the next 2 months, 3 months, 1 week?
No, we're doing the math, about 3 months.
Okay.
We'll have to, if we don't hit some good foundations, by June we're going to have to make some decisions. 40%, what does that mean? You cut your staff 40%? Cut your services 40%?
So this shelter has capacity for about 140 people. But right now, there's only 40 here right now. As you can see, it's pretty empty. There's not a lot of people here. But last time we were here, there were kids running around. It was so loud you could barely hear yourself think. They were playing soccer, they were playing with trucks. It's a sign of kind of the impact of some of these Trump-era policies are having on shelters across the city, really. One interesting thing that Father Pat told us was that he started hearing English in the shelter again, which is a sign that the deportees are folks who have spent the majority of their lives in the U.S.
People are generous. Even those who don't have much know that there are others who have less. So they're usually willing and able to help. It would be hard to shut it down, I think.
Yeah.
But once you start cutting staff, and if the funding comes back, it's hard to get the staff back. So I'm not sure what we're going to do. I never imagined this would happen. So people are still being very generous. The local people of Tijuana, they're still showing up with their donations, and we thank them for that.
This right here is where the donations go. As you can see right there, reparto de ropa. This is where they distribute a lot of the clothes, right? Father Pat was saying that the people of Tijuana, people of San Diego, very generous. They donate not just their money, but their clothes as well. Get a sense here of kind of the need and the population of this place, right? It's full of shoes. Shoes for men, shoes for young boys, really pink and shiny rain boots for little girls. It gives you a sense of the people and family that to make this place a community, right? And it's not just shoes, right? If we come over here, you can see they have an entire room dedicated to clothes. Similar story here, right? The clothes tell the story of who lives here. You can see right here they have a lot of baby clothes, a lot of clothes for little boys. Further back, I can see a lot of coats and sweaters. It is cold in Tijuana right now. It's been unusually wet and rainy. So it tells you a little bit of the need too. So thankfully, even though USAID funding has been cut off, some of the generosity from the people of Tijuana and San Diego is still going strong. Ya nos vamos. Gracias. ¿Sí? ¿Nos abre esa puerta? Gracias. Gracias. Hasta luego.
Some great work by Gustavo there. On May 7th, the federal government will start enforcing the Real ID Act. KPBS reporter Melissa May says 4 DMV offices in San Diego County are making it easier for people to get their real ID.
The Real ID Act establishes security standards for state-issued driver's licenses and ID cards.
Well, this goes way back to 9/11, the 9/11 incident, which is more than 20 years ago. The 9/11 Commission said, we need to find a way for all states to issue driver's licenses in the same manner so that we can ensure that the people who are receiving these driver's licenses are in fact the people they say they are.
Starting next month, anyone 18 years and older who plans to fly domestically or visit certain federal facilities must have a Real ID. Other acceptable forms of identification include U.S. passports, permanent resident cards, or military IDs.
May 7th is not a deadline to get a Real ID. That's only the date that the TSA will begin to enforce this federal requirement. The DMV will continue to issue Real ID driver's licenses and ID cards well after that date.
Spokesperson Jaime Garza says the DMV anticipated the increase in people wanting to get their Real ID.
Beginning April 14, we're going to be opening 4 San Diego area DMV offices 1 hour earlier every single day except Wednesday. And this particular hour will be dedicated to helping Californians with an appointment to get a Real ID. And we're planning to keep these extended hours through June 27th.
The 4 DMV offices opening early are in Claremont, San Marcos, El Cajon, and Poway. To apply for a Real ID, people need one document proving your identity, like a birth certificate or passport, plus 2 documents proving California residency, like a cell phone or utility bill. Garza recommends starting the Real ID application online at realid.dmv.ca.gov.
You'll upload your documents, and then you'll schedule an appointment. So when you go to the DMV office to complete this process, you need to be sure to bring your uploaded documents with you so they can be verified.
For people planning to travel soon, the Transportation Security Administration says starting May 7th, travelers who don't have a real ID or other federal identification should expect delays. They recommend arriving 3 hours before your flight time. Garza says if you already have a valid federally approved ID, there is no rush to get your real ID. Melissa May, KPBS News.
A private school in Encinitas is getting ready to open affordable housing units for teachers. It's less than a quarter mile away from the Grauer School. Units are listed at below market rate for the area. And according to apartments.com, the average one-bedroom apartment in Encinitas runs just over $2,500 a month. One teacher at the school who lives in Vista says his biggest fight when looking for an apartment wasn't necessarily affordability.
I mean, it's not even just the price, or it's just the fact that it's accessible and just for teachers, so you don't have to, like, right now the market, you find a place that you think you're interested in and it's gone the next day or faster. When I moved into my current apartment, I went there and they said, if you don't sign this contract now, it'll be gone tomorrow almost for sure.
The head of school says teachers will have the chance to stay at the housing for about 2 years. That will give them the chance to get on their feet and hopefully save money before moving into apartments of their own. State Farm Insurance is asking for another rate hike for property owners in California. The insurance provider met with state leaders about the matter earlier this week. As Brady Halbleib reports, it comes as California deals with the destructive aftermath of wildfires earlier this year.
We don't talk about sports and weather up here. We talk about insurance and fire risk.
After losing her home in the river fire in 2021, Colfax resident Liz Porter was able to rebuild thanks to coverage from the FAIR Plan.
Really, my FAIR Plan experience was not terrible.
But after rebuilding, she and most of her neighbors signed up with State Farm. And while she has more coverage on her home, she's already seen prices go up several times.
Of course they're asking for a rate increase. That's what they do.
And they're trying to do it again. State Farm representatives met with state leaders Tuesday to request rate increases by up to 22% for homeowners, 15% for condos, and 38% for rental properties.
Californians deserve fairness, they deserve transparency, and that's what's happening today. A judge is asking questions, taking testimony.
Insurance Commissioner Ricardo Lara already gave State Farm the green light to raise rates by up to 22% for homeowners. The approval, however, depends on whether the company can prove to a judge the price increases are fair.
State Farm has a list of things that they have to provide, and they're providing their financial statements.
That includes showing the rising cost of wildfire damage and home repairs and rebuilding. They'll also need solid data proving homes in fire-prone areas carry higher risk. They must also demonstrate that the rate hike is necessary to maintain a fair profit margin, not just to boost earnings. And if they can't make the case, a judge could reject the request.
We're at the turning point.
Industry expert Carl Sussman says there are several factors driving State Farm's proposal, including the growing gap between rates and actual coverage, along with inflation. And he warns it could be a long time before any rates come back down.
I think when we'll actually start to see real premium relief is going to be when we have more carriers that are actually writing business and competing. We just don't have that in California yet.
The CDC says every year there are around 4,000 drownings, but these tragedies can be prevented. Mandy Gaither talks to a pediatric emergency medicine doctor about how to keep kids safe in the water.
It can happen in an instant. Experts say drownings are often quick and silent without even a single splash.
As a pediatric ER doctor, we see drownings come in very frequently during the summer and when swim season starts.
That's why Dr. Sarah Lazarus with Children's Healthcare of Atlanta says it's so important to make water safety a priority. Whether children or teens are swimming in a pool or at a beach, drowning is preventable.
Every time I hear it happens so quickly. A parent may just turn their back, and when they turn around, their child is underwater.
Lazarus says if your child can't swim 2 lengths of the pool without assistance, parents should be within arm's reach of the child at all times. Once the child is a competent swimmer and can go to pool links without stopping, parents can graduate to eyes reach supervision, always keeping an eye on the child in the water. She says it's also important to avoid distractions and to make sure there's a four-sided self-latching fence around any pool you visit. A Coast Guard approved life jacket should also be worn, especially in open water. And if a parent can't swim, Lazarus says it's never too late to learn.
Remember, because you are your child's best lifeguard, it's so important that you also have those swim skills.
For Health Minute, I'm Mandy Gaither.
A beach staircase in Encinitas is closed for structural repairs. City leaders say the D Street beach access staircase is not safe for public use. Barricades are up to secure the area, and the city says that they are still assessing structural damage on the stairs and don't have a reopening date. For now, beachgoers should use Moonlight Beach to access the D Street beach area.
It has been a warm trend for the past week, with a lot of locations getting into the 70s, 80s, or even across the deserts. We've managed to make it now 3 days in the 90s. The heat remains for at least one more day for pretty much all of us. Onshore flow starts to cool this weekend. You'll notice the coolest trend, though, comes into early next week, and that's when we finally knock a lot of those desert communities out of the 90s. So there is relief on the way. 55, though, the low in the city tonight as you look towards Oceanside. 48 for the low there. 49 in Oceanside, 48 in Ramona, and Borrego Springs coming down to 62 degrees. Our pattern still with this high pressure system over the southwest. It's warm, it's dry. We're really not seeing any sort of changes here coming up for Friday, which means the numbers are more of the same. 73 the high in the city, Chula Vista going up to 72. As you look towards Escondido, 85 for the high in Borrego Springs, launching towards the triple digits with 101 for the afternoon. Even Mount Laguna will be in the upper 60s, close to 70 degrees. Coastal communities, you can find them holding on to the 70s as we head through tomorrow. Then after that, the weekend, a bit more comfortable for us back in the 60s. One of the coolest days of the week will be Monday. That's when we're going to see those numbers fall off a little bit for all communities, including inland communities, with some extra clouds. More of that onshore push will be back into the upper 60s then as well, after a run into the mid 80s again for tomorrow. 70s for the weekend should be pretty nice for us. Mountain communities, really nice as we see those numbers fall back into the mid 50s for Monday. So that's our cool down still to come. And like I said, desert communities, we do get out of the 90s back to the upper 80s for Monday and Tuesday. It's not a ton of relief, but it definitely comes down from the triple digits. So that will be the changes that are in store for us. It's still, though, hot through the weekend as the numbers slide off a little bit. For KPBS News, I'm AccuWeather meteorologist Melissa Constancer.
Check out a brand new podcast from KPBS. It's called The Finest. The podcast captures the people, art, and movements redefining our region's cultural identity. A new episode is out today, and you can listen to the first 2 episodes now wherever you get your podcasts. There is a place in our county where you can find a particular kind of machine. In fact, there are dozens and dozens of them. And to see them in action is like a trip back in time. Ken Kramer shows us in this story about San Diego.
This is something you just don't see and hear anymore. And this is Bill Raffnell working it, creating something in a way that people nowadays find pretty unusual.
They come in here and they say, look at what you're doing. They hadn't ever seen anybody do that.
Do what exactly? This. There's an art to it, a pattern of movement.
It is relaxing. And in that relaxation, you eventually get in the rhythm of throwing the shuttle back and forth and beating with the loom.
The loom. Bill is without a doubt San Diego County's biggest fan of weaving. That's what he is. He's a weaver. He's using a loom, and anymore so few people seem to know what that is, what you make with a loom.
This is where your clothes are made. This is where our comforts and our sheets and everything else are made. These looms can do all of that.
When he says these looms, he means these looms. About 50 of them in a building in Vista on the grounds of the Antique Gas and Steam Engine Museum. 50 of them. How did that happen?
People would have looms that didn't know what to do with them, so they gave them to us. People would die.
Families say, what are we going to do with Grandma's loom? Oh, well, there's Bill Raffnell. There's this place I've heard of in Vista.
People don't know what to do with them, and we do.
You begin with yarn or thread, and a loom weaves it into cloth. If it weren't for looms, he says, we'd be running around naked or going out to kill bears for clothing. This is what civilized us, got us into shirts and pants and skirts and coats. Looms have been around for centuries. A couple of them here date from 150 years ago. As for Bill, he's making table runners and tablecloths and wall pieces today. Beautiful work that for him is a labor of love.
What a wonderful thing, because you have something to show for it toward the end of the day.
As the word has gotten out in San Diego, people keep bringing more looms in here. Well, that's okay.
And so they can come and learn how to use that equipment, or they can give it to us and we will use it. But
Bill is really something. He has so much enthusiasm for weaving. There's a plaque on the wall that says this whole weaving center in Vista, the whole place, is lovingly dedicated to him. And at 81 years old, he says all that motion, throwing the shuttle, using your feet, keeps you pretty healthy, too. So it's good for you, it preserves history, it's fun.
And the end result is you end up with something that's pretty.
I don't know if there's another place like this, but I doubt there's anybody quite like Bill. Who knew that he and the loom could be so much a story about San Diego?
And Ken Kramer has a half hour of stories every week about San Diego, and you can see them Thursday nights at 8 o'clock right here on KPBS. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. I'm Maya Triple C. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.